I'm one of those people that doesn't believe Jacob Zuma and the radical economic transformation and Mkhonto weSizwe are here to save black people. I think they're just here to try and take over what the incumbents have and then become the new superpowers. Why, when you look at the success of Trevor Noah and Black Coffee, it becomes exponential when they go overseas. It's been proven. You look at the success of Siya Kolisi locally.
Welcome to another enthralling episode of State of the Nation. I am Mike Sham. Now, as you know, because you're a loyal watcher of this platform and you've subscribed and you've done all of these things that are so important, that we deal a lot with politics and economics, but that's not the only story going. We also want some people that are moving conversation in South Africa. And there's certainly one person who's moving the conversation as much as anybody in this country, and that is the one and only Penwell Mlotshwa, the host of Penwell, the Black Pen. I love that. I love your podcast, a massive podcast. If you haven't watched this man in action, Matthew's definitely going to have to leave a link in there. Go and look at that YouTube channel. It's fantastic. Penwell, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Mike, thank you so much. I'm impressed by your pronunciation of my surname. Thank you so much. Officially on the record, I have to apologize to you. I wanted to do it on camera. This was our second postponement because of me. I won't mention what happened in my life, but there was a very heavy loss in my family the first time we meant to sit down. And then I just kind of screwed up the second one. But for your patience, for your understanding, to yourself, Matt, the whole team, I just want to say thank you for hosting me, and I appreciate it so much.
You see, this humility has got me completely on the back foot already. Well done. If that was a tactical
now
move,
you can't
it worked.
attack
Now
me.
I can't attack you. I can only be nice about you. But Penwell, let's talk about your channel, because you've had this thing going. You've got, you're approaching 200,000 subscribers. You put out some really intense content.
Yeah.
And you have some discussions that in some cases are quite heavy. It's not everybody's bag. But first, take me back.
Yeah.
What got you started in this world of putting stuff out there?
What got me started? I think some of us in this world have curious minds, and our curious minds drive us in various directions. Some curious minds end at like video gaming. Some end in the business world. Some end in, I guess you'd call it politics, which I think this platform does a lot of. Because of having a curious mind, you accumulate a lot of information that at some point you assume everyone knows. And as you travel the world, you realize people don't know, some people don't want to know, etc. So you start sharing it, and people find you to be interesting. And you're like, I'm not interesting, I just read a book that you maybe didn't read. Yeah. And you start sharing this stuff, especially with the advent of social media. My gateway drug was Facebook in 2005. I'd share a lot. Later on, the Twitters would come into the world and the YouTubes. I'd post a lot of videos on Facebook. People started saying go to YouTube because YouTube was paying at the time. And COVID lockdown happened. Podcasting started becoming a thing. Joe Rogan was big for me even before COVID lockdown. And at some point I was like, I think I've got views. I've listened to some of the opinions. I think they trash. I think I've got better opinions. I think I know some cool people. I think there are people whose stories have not been shared. And we haven't had, in South Africa at least, conversation. We're so used to one-way interviews. I ask a question, you answer, and that's the end of it. And I'm like, I think conversation would be nice, and especially unique conversation. It's one thing getting the president of the country sitting on a platform asking him what's happening with the budget. And it's another thing to be like, bro, you were lighty at some point. Like, what were you thinking? Or what have you been doing with your money? Things that people actually want to know, but no one ever thinks of having a conversation around that. And I started initially with some experiments in 2021 with the riots in KZN. And then officially with my partner at the time, Tibogo Kibine, he created a studio in August 2022. I'd already started doing work with DJ Spoo on the Hustlers Corner. The same month I shot with MacGyver, Podcast and Chill. We started the Penwell show. And looking back, we didn't really know we were going to do as well as we're doing now. But I'm very grateful. And we've had some really cool guests that I know personally, some cool conversations that have traveled around the world, including certain politics around Africa and specifically around the DRC and Rwanda and those things. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I do think some of these conversations, we can go global. And with some of the chats I've had with people like John Savage at AMPT, Garrett Cliff, Rena Broomberg, who's amazing, and other players in politics, in business, around the world, I think we're still underselling each other. We're like the commodities market. We can have really cool conversations about politics, human beings, where the world should be moving. And I've just been enjoying it.
Fantastic. And so we've got two things in common, that we both have a podcast.
Yeah.
And we've both been on Mac G's show.
That's what's up.
I know that that I got on there because somebody pulled out. So I got a call to be there in half an hour.
It's the universe.
Fine,
it's the universe.
Fine. I'm not necessarily somebody that falls into their demographic for a whole host of reasons, but I found it very fascinating and interesting. And that was in the build-up to the election. And I know that that you kind of dipped your toe in and then out of politics, but it's not really kind of something that it's an area that you don't particularly want to go deep into, is it?
It's debatable. I know we met in Sandhurst, and you were like, we have to chat. I was like, we definitely have to chat. And then right after the election's outcomes, I was so gutted and angry. I was like, I don't want to speak about politics. I don't want to speak about politicians. I hate these guys. I'm over them. I already knew they were bad actors. But the reality is we do need to speak about politics. Even today, we do need to speak about the government of national unity. I've been avoiding politics, and my father, who passed away in 2020, we were sitting at his house, Emadadeni Township in Newcastle, and we were watching the news, and he was like, that's where you're going to end up. I'm like, where? He's like, in politics. I'm like, please don't curse me. I don't want. Years later, I'd been some way involved in politics. I'm still trying to avoid politics because of just the way the space runs. But politics is important, and especially in this country, especially with the history we've had in this country. So last year I had to make a decision because we invited a few people, Duduzane Zuma being one of them. I like Duduzane. I've been wanting to sit with Gayton McKenzie, who's a mate. And then there were a few new political parties that were coming through, and they don't get spotlight on mainstream. So it was like, oh, come through. Let's hear what you have. I want something new personally. So if you have something different, let's hear about it. After that, a couple of other politicians started wanting to sit down, and I was like, I don't do politics. Politics is trash. But then I think similar to Podcast and Chill, because I think it was pressure from their audience. It was like, the elections are coming, and you guys can't ignore them and act like they're not there. And you guys have an opportunity to sit with these people, ask them certain questions, attack them where possible, and try and shape or reshape the narrative. So I sat with politicians. As expected, they came and they campaigned and they lied, which, look, I kind of knew was coming. The elections came, the elections results came out. Cyril and the ANC did badly, which I really was happy about. But then they got into bed with the DA, which I don't really like. And some of the newer guys who claimed that they were about fresh ideas were fucking lying. They were there trying to get into the GNU. I was like, not much has changed. So I was annoyed, and I didn't want to speak about it because I was angry. But maybe I'm less angry now. But yeah, that was my thing. I don't think I can avoid speaking about politics. I try. The Bella Bill has come out. May not necessarily be politics directly, but something like the two-part system is something to consider. Leon Schreiber and the guys are doing work at Home Affairs. Gayton, of course. We need to talk about it. I hate it. But maybe because I hate the political system, it's probably why after being calm, I need to go back and carry on hammering.
Well, yeah, I fully understand your frustration with politics. I mean, gee whiz, I spoke to all of those people, and yes, I spoke to probably a lot more direct politicians than you would have. And yes, if I have to hear the word manifesto once more, yeah, it might cause a physical reaction. But there is a place. Obviously, there's a big reason why it's important that somebody like you remains engaged, if you want to call it that. And that is that I see recently a survey came out, a Pan-African survey.
Okay.
to say amongst African youth from many countries, to ask them about it was broad political questions, and then asking them, would they like to immigrate? And the number was obscenely high. More than half of African youngsters, and Africa is the only place producing youngsters at scale, young people, right? We know that the rest of the world is not producing young people, but Africa is. But yet, the bulk of African young people want to leave the country. And
continent.
The African continent want to leave the country, and they want to go to the first world, right? They want to go to Europe, want to go to North America, and these are places that, in the same survey, tested really poorly with the same demographic.
I can't believe it.
But yet, they put as their leading reason for wanting to leave is politics, right? Saying that we would love to stay in our country of birth. We'd love to stay on the African continent, but we can't with these leaders. Corruption, maladministration, all of these things. And that is where you see the marriage between, let's say, your world and the world that I'm sort of do on this show, which is you're concerned about the development of people and the future of the continent, and yet here it is that politicians are the biggest factor in them wanting to leave.
Before Podcast and Chill started inviting serious people like yourself to come on the platform.
I'm just old. I'm not serious. But anyway.
Really? Okay, he's just old, guys. My bad. No, I'm kidding, Mike. Mac G had gone on a platform. It was myself, him, DJ Sbu, David Mashabela. Were invited on, I think it was Truth to Power with Prof. JJ Tabane. And Mac G at the time was like, I'm not sure if we're allowed to swear here.
Yeah, sure. It's the internet.
Matt, we're allowed to swear? It's the internet. Jace. So Mac G is like, fuck politics. The youth don't care about politics. And he was right at the time. Later on, myself and DJ Sbu would do a couple of political interviews. Podcast and Chill would do political interviews, which I think was important. But after the elections, I was reminded of why young people are not interested and why this sham, excuse the pun, of democracy that we have, most people who are eligible to vote are not voting. There's a reason for that, and the despondency comes from we are not seeing change. The people that we think should be running the country are not involved in politics. We are being lied to. Not much is changing, and no one is actually listening to us. They pretend to be, but nothing changes. The cognitive dissonance of that survey you find in South Africa as well, where young black kids will say they're angry with white people, apartheid, colonialism, whatever, but their aspirations are to move in really nice white suburbs. They want to send their kids to nice white schools, et cetera, et cetera. And it's because of the failure of black African politicians. I believe that Africa, by and large, is a mine, a factory, a farm for the rest of the developed world. And the leaders that have been handpicked, because I believe they've been handpicked for us, serve that agenda. They are not here to develop Africa for Africans. They are not invested in developing this continent for the people. And I do think after sitting with some of them that they actually don't believe that this continent can be a world leader. I don't know if it's because some of them have tried and failed. When you're a young activist and you push and some of your friends end up getting killed, some of your friends sell out, maybe you become a cynic when you get older and you're like, you know what, let me actually just make money for myself, take care of my family, and where possible, do some welfare for the people and say, but we built a clinic and a school there, it's fine. But I don't really believe that Africans can actually run the world and be leaders and be amazing at anything on a large scale. And that's made me sad, and that becomes one of the reasons why people would leave. Why, when you look at the success of Trevor Noah and Black Coffee, it becomes exponential when they go overseas. It's been proven. You look at the success of Siya Kolisi locally and why he's not playing for African Bombers or some team, Motherwell or New Brighton. It's because you look at what happened when he moved to Grey High, when he moved to the Stormers. I can be as passionate as I want about this place, but the administrators of Eastern Cape Rugby, the administrators of the DRC, they don't want me to win. And when I leave Zimbabwe and I go to London, when I go to New York, I get rewarded for my talents.
Yeah. Do you want to know why that exists?
Hit me.
To me, that has been my lifelong frustration, and certainly a reason why I love and hate South Africa in equal measure, but yet I'm spend the rest of my life here. Is that one must understand what politicians are. They're meant to be your servants. When you say that you've seen no change, it's not for them to change. It's for you to change. And this, I think, is the African problem, waiting for a solution to come from on high, wherever that is, where the solution comes from down at the bottom. But what are our leaders doing? Well, understand one thing, that there is a thing that political leaders in bad countries do, and South Africa's now getting, we are starting to understand this in South Africa, and that is that our leaders do not want successful black people.
Yes.
They don't, because it terrifies them.
100%.
Because the thing that they are most afraid of is your own agency, right? They need you to need them.
100%.
So when you say, when are you going to do something about it? They rub their hands, because you've now handed back your power to them.
100%.
Saying, when are you going to expropriate the farm? The real answer is, can I buy a farm? Right? That's agency versus dependency.
Yes.
So African leaders at this stage, and it will move on, because what Africa needs is a success story, and it will ignite a firestorm in Africa when that happens, right? And that is one country that runs, one country in Africa run like a successful first world country will ignite the rest of Africa towards the same end. But you've got a collusion of 52 countries,
of course,
of saying, let's keep our citizens disempowered. Let's keep them thinking that their problem are people who have been dead for 200 years, right? Let's keep them saying, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? Because then they have to return us to power. Instead of you and your generation saying, we are the change makers. Let's build on what we've got. Let's actually create excellence right here. Now, once again, to use my role as a senior citizen over here, I see all of the ingredients of a very, very successful society, right? And that is that what you do need in society to be successful are people who are entrepreneurial and creative, right? The rest of the stuff is secondary to that. When you are creative, when you are entrepreneurial, you hire an auditor. You don't have to be the auditor, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. What I'm saying is that Africa has, and that is why you mention people like Trevor Noah, Black Coffee, etc. And they go out there. What is winning them the day is their no-holds-barred creativity, right? But in South Africa, we are so caught up in some of the arguments, and in Africa for that matter, with some of the bullshit, right? And falling for it, and sadly, I think the internet has made it worse, because what you have is people have lit this fire of saying, oh, they're out to get us, they want to stop us, world authority, oh, the new world order. What a bunch of bullshit, right? The reality is that it suits people in all kinds of ways to keep people dependent on them.
True.
But yet young Africans keep on saying, well, we've checked out of politics because nothing changes.
Yeah.
Well, what is your expectation?
Yeah.
If you look at countries that have really made great strides, that have gone up the rankings to what we would call today first world, or whatever we want to call it, the countries to which people want to immigrate, those people have got enormous agency.
I don't want to debate. So you spoke about...
I'm happy to debate.
Yeah. No. I'm happy with almost everything you said. When you speak about we're waiting for countries to light a spark, there are people that are obviously looking to Rwanda and Paul Kagame to see what that does. There are people that are looking at some of the West African francophone countries, Burkina Faso, Gabon, Mali, and the likes, who seem to be fighting.
They're fighting, but they're not going to progress for their people.
We don't know.
Because I can guarantee it. Sorry, there is something that this hairstyle buys you, and that's a bit of experience, right? Because that's going to follow a very well-trodden road. They come in there with their best intentions.
Sure.
If you take somebody like, who's this guy that the EFF loves so much, the guy who got killed by his own people.
Che Guevara?
No. The guy who
Thomas Sankara.
Thomas Sankara. The only thing he did right was get killed in time. But soon enough, he's going to become a military dictator. It's a baked-in thing.
Sure.
The guys can't. And like Kagame, what's his retirement plan?
Yeah.
Is he grooming a successor? So, dictatorship work until the dictator either becomes useless or counterproductive, or he dies. Right? I'm saying that's not the answer either. So what is happening in West Africa is going to be equally devastating. There's no doubt about it, because they'll eventually have to sell out to a superpower, and they will. There is no doubt. I can promise you that. Right? And we'll see that within the next year.
So that's the first part, that people are looking at those countries to see if they can bring something new, because what we currently have isn't really working. The idea of looking to the West, for example, and their so-called democracy, America, maybe the UK and parts of Europe, I don't think is what Africans should aspire to and what they need. At the same time and in the same breath, the problem to what you were saying about dependency is we do come from a history as black Africans of looking up to a king and a queen to solve our problems, which some of our politicians carry themselves like kings and queens that never want to leave power
Blue light.
until they pass on. So we do need something new and fresh. Part of why I'm criticized is specifically because I'm looking for something new. That's where I'll study the Afrikaner community, I'll visit Orania, I'll spend time with AfriForum to be like, what are you guys doing right in terms of agency, solving your own problems, so that everyone else can learn from you. This includes white South Africans, black, colored, Indian, etc. But a lot of people are not happy with that type of association because of legacy. I, unlike you, and this is where I guess the debate comes in, I'm not convinced that democracy is what's best. I'm not convinced that the money system is what's best. I understand the argument that it's what's best of what people have seen in the past and of the offers that are on the table now. But I don't even think it's serving the people that champion these things. And it becomes a zero-sum game, which I debate with a lot of mates who have money. You cannot be successful unless other people are oppressed elsewhere, either close to you, as your neighbors living in shacks, or outsourced somewhere far away like India or China where it's hidden. And you're like, but we pay fair wages. And you're like, you guys pay fair wages, but your produce is manufactured somewhere else where people are oppressed, so it's hidden. I'm not sure what the solution is, and sometimes I even wonder if we should be looking for a solution. Because when people have been presented with options and they keep choosing the option that oppresses them, you kind of almost want to be like, I think you deserve it. And that's where I found myself after the elections. I've said this before on platforms, and I know it upsets people, but it's my opinion, and I don't mind being bashed for it. I think black South Africans enjoy being oppressed. We can debate it and argue it and whatever, but I've seen so many good people, Thomas Sankara being one of them. I don't know what Ibrahim Traore and those guys are planning, but if the people are not going to come to the party in trying to fix a country, fix a space, and are going to hide and cower when there are bad people that come through, but at the same time want the bad people to give them money and jobs, and then it's almost like you kind of deserve the situation you're in. And people are scared of doing things differently. And the people that are a bit brave make noise, attract the attention of people in power, get given a cushy position or funding or whatever, and then we lose them. And then we're back to square one. And we're back to Africa being just a big factory to power the rest of the world. And look, your theory might be right that some of these guys might sell out. They just maybe don't want to sell out to France and America again, unless they get a better deal. And they're hoping that China and Russia and someone else is like, look, we've got a better deal for you. And then we'll see. And then to the people on the ground, it's like, look, we've done better than the people before us. But at the end of the day, we're still kind of hoping that a superpower becomes our parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, there's a certain comfort in being oppressed, because then your welfare depends on the sort of handouts from the oppressor.
Yeah.
So I do understand, and that's why I recently did a piece where I compared the the politicking style between Donald Trump and Jacob Zuma, and I said they use exactly the same playbook.
Sure.
And the playbook is we're the victims. They're out to get us. In fact, not only are they out to get us, they're out to get you as well. And the only person who can save you is me.
It's me.
Me. And if you don't support me, they're going to take it all away from you. And then you add in some wild thing, like in Trump's case, only I can stop World War III. In Jacob Zuma's case, he's going to say, I have to pick one. You know, they're going to bring back apartheid or whatever. Right? It's a well-trodden playbook by what I call this new brand of politicians I'm very scared of, called a post-truth populist, right? You just lie flat out. You don't even bother to even, you know, you don't just bend the truth. You just say they're eating cats and dogs. You know what I mean? You just go out and flat out lie.
Jeez, I saw that clip.
Yeah, it's quite something. I managed to piss off both sides of the argument, by the way. Everybody was angry with me. The Zuma supporters are angry with me because I had Trump in there, and the Trump supporters are angry because I had Zuma in there.
Yeah.
But in essence, what you've got is you've got two guys that flat out lie about everything, right? They've been there. They've been unsuccessful leaders in both cases, and they want to say the reason we're unsuccessful is they stopped us from achieving the real mission, which was to stop World War III or to stop them from bringing back. Really? Who's going to bring back colonialism? Please tell me. You know, put it on a postcard and explain this to me. Like how far do you want to stretch any kind of reality by saying this shit? But anyway, it does have a constituency, and the constituency is not linked to necessarily to educational standards or whatever. There's really smart people supporting Donald Trump.
Sure.
You know, so it's not just like, oh, it's poor people that fall for this. No, there's some very wealthy, very accomplished people that fall for this. We saw that on show in many of the world wars where really intelligent people followed some wacky ideas. But, you know, so, you know, I understand why we go back to a form of oppression. But to go back to a point you made earlier when you said, where does it end? Where does the exploitation end? I do think that there is an end date for the exploitation.
Okay.
And that quite simply, and here once again is where, you know, I view this in a very cold, dispassionate way, sadly, because it's an emotional issue. And that is at the point that the world runs out of cheap labor, which is not too far away. And it's not too far away, not for nefarious reasons, but for science. Right? We've got the whole Western world, as we call it, North America, Europe, South America, even in population decline. And the same thing in Asia, where China's problem is dire. Russia's is worse. And India's got a problem as well.
Population.
Population, yep. There's almost not, in fact, you know that the South African population is declining. Do you know that?
I didn't know that.
People don't want to follow the science. And once again, don't think that you're ever going to get your science from your politicians, because they're never going to tell you the truth. But this is an obsession of mine, and I do follow these trends pretty closely. But the bottom line is that by about 2050, right, there will not be a region in the world that produces more than what they call replacement rate.
Jeez.
And when that happens, there's not going to be cheap labor to put together your TV set, whatever.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to start paying them more.
Of course.
Do you know that? Do you know what led to the prosperity in Europe? Was the Black Death, being the smallpox epidemic, which in about a year killed 1/3 of the European population. Do you know that?
More resources for everyone. Thank you,
No,
Thanos.
so what it killed off, in essence, was the peasantry, because suddenly there was a fight for labor.
Okay.
And that turned peasants into farm workers and farm workers into farm owners. It's that peasantry thing that you need to get rid of. Now, in South Africa, we could do that, but we choose not to. We choose to not follow economic growth.
Economic growth.
Yes.
Donald Trump, Jacob Zuma, robots.
Yes.
So I think, I stand to be corrected, that some of the more powerful people in the world are looking to use artificial intelligence and robots to replace cheap labor in future. And I think in their heads they believe it's going to be cheaper than human beings who get tired, pop babies, need smoke breaks. AI robots are going to be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think that's their plan. I stand to be corrected.
Yeah, just sort of, we'll take this. It's a plan as old as time.
Sure.
That's why we first ever put a horse in front of a cart.
Sure.
So everybody's always been looking at making these processes, these laborious processes, into something that can be, call it automated or done by somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't think that this is something new. The tools may seem new, but this is a trend as old as time.
Sure. I'm a huge fan of Jacob Zuma and Donald Trump, because of the. Well, I'm trying to think of how to articulate this properly. I love the fact that they have exposed the systems for what they are. Are they exposing the system on behalf of the people? No. But the truth is the system is a mess and the system is biased, and it's good to have people at their levels expose it to the ordinary man. What we do with it, sadly, is not much. And the reality is they do it for their own interests. I'm one of those people that doesn't believe Jacob Zuma and the radical economic transformation and Umkhonto weSizwe are here to save black people. I think they're just here to try and take over what the incumbents have and then become the new superpowers. Same with Trump. I think Trump and whoever his supporters are just like, we don't want CNN to be the most powerful network. We want X to be the most powerful news agency, and then we'll push our worldview onto the world. So I'm not naive about that. But I like the fact that considering how much power and success and influence they've had, both of them, they still had the ability to be frustrated and to show it to the rest of us. Probably using us in some way to fight battles we don't understand. But it is what it is. And that makes me a fan, especially in the way they do it, because both of them are incredibly entertaining. And if nothing else, Russell Crowe, Gladiator, are you not entertained? Because we don't know why we're on this planet. And sometimes we get bored. Sometimes politicians get very boring. It's like, well, these guys are exciting. So we consume them for those reasons, and I like them for that. Economic growth, I don't think is the solution for the world or for this country, unless if we're going to isolate it to, we just want to prosper compared to everyone else. If we're doing it relative to everyone else, sure. But if we're doing it to create a better world, I always hear people speak about economic growth, and it's normally people who don't want to change the way things operate. What I will say about Zuma and Umkhonto weSizwe and other people is their fight was very valid. I'm not sure what Trump's fight is specifically, but there hasn't been much change in this country and on this continent. And the idea of colonialism happening again is very real. It may not come from Europe or from America. It may come from China. It may come from India. And it may come very sleek in terms of building infrastructure which we cannot afford to pay back. It's no longer IMF loans. Now it's infrastructure where you couldn't pay for it, but now we own it. So now we own your ports, your airports. Maybe we even own your mines, but we didn't beat you up. We didn't enslave you. It was fair. Willing buyer, willing seller. You couldn't pay us back.
Yeah.
But now we own half of your country. One of the dilemmas I struggle with in my mind is, because I was sucked into it growing up, this idea of equality, this idea of inclusion, this idea of diversity. On racial grounds, number one, and then on gender grounds at some point. I'm struggling with it because I'm not sure if that's what we should be chasing. The problem is the legacies of the past force us to engage this, because many people who didn't deserve to be in certain places were given a leg up because you have a penis, or because you are white, or because you come from Europe, whatever the case may be. But I don't know if it's what's best for the world. And it's something I struggle with. But I do understand why many people buy into the idea. The economy in South Africa is not transformed from a racial and sex perspective, so we must fight for that. And it becomes easy to fight. And when you hear advice from someone with a penis, someone who's white, someone from Europe saying, this is not the solution, you get angry because you're like, you're not the person to say it. But they might be saying the right thing, and it becomes tough. And I don't know how we get people to buy into the idea of forget race, forget gender, and just focus on what's best for everyone. And that's where I kind of get stumped, because I haven't come up with I haven't come up with an answer for that is satisfactory, number one. And number two, the people that are in power are not doing a great job. Cyril Ramaphosa leading the ANC but running a GNU, which is a grand coalition with the DA, I don't think they are the solution. And I don't think the democratic framework we have in this country is the solution. I don't think our legal framework is the solution. And I don't think the current monetary system is the solution. I haven't come up with proper alternatives, but I do think the things that we have currently are not helping us, especially where we are competing with the world. The population in this country is not getting more skilled. It's regressing. Our employment situation, and by employment, I don't mean having jobs. I mean doing meaningful, value-adding work, whether you're self-employed, whatever the case may be. We're not progressing. Our welfare is getting worse, which means we're creating more adult babies as we move forward. And we're not becoming competitive in the world at all. And the guys at the top almost don't care. And where white people were better off, I see white people moving in a similar direction. As I drive around the country, I see more white hobos. I see more white mothers standing in queues for SASSA grants. I see more angry white people, and it's getting to a point where some of them are angry with other white people and not black people anymore. So it's sad for me, and I don't know if there's an agenda at play or if it's just people in power that don't actually have a plan and are too scared to bring in talented black, white, colored Indian people to be like, I think you have a better plan than me, so come through. Because if we come through, there's a chance that you lose your wealth and your privilege and your power.
So you've interviewed some really interesting people, and you've obviously had a lot of discussion on these kind of topics. What has been the most, to you, the most effective conversations that you've had on these kind of topics as to taking the country forward?
Not the guests themselves, but the interaction between myself and the guest. The idea of taking away some freedoms.
Do you think we've got too many freedoms?
I believe for a fact we have too many freedoms. And it's particularly because freedom is meant to be earned and not just given. If you give a 5-year-old, 10-year-old child democracy and freedom, they might fuck up their lives because they don't really know what they're doing and they don't know the consequences. And we've got populations that are like that.
Which freedoms are you specifically sort of not, that you feel should be earned?
The right to vote and make a decision on who should be running governance structures. There's an idea of scrapping the current systems of traditional leadership, kings and the like. And if that doesn't happen, the counter to that is then cut them off from tax and state support.
But then you're going to go, I'm presuming, to some kind of democratic process, which is going to lead you straight back to the system you got right now, isn't it?
No, definitely not using democracy. This would require some form of dictatorship, some form of bullying and forcing people to... I mean, a good father is not a father that does whatever his kids say they should do. A good father is someone that we'd like to think has got experience and has good intentions for their family and does the hard things that no one likes. How we measure that father is if the children turn out to be great and they have some type of agency and independence. And if not, then it means this father was just a tyrant and a dictator and his kids are hungry, starving, not thriving in the world.
Do we have, what's the state of fatherhood in South Africa now?
So part of the problem with the freedoms, if we go back, is this idea of, this is going to be controversial, this idea of women empowerment and feminism, which was pushed because men were given some type of freedom, go make money, etc. And men could sleep with anyone they want. There was no real responsibility for family. Men fucked it up really badly. Women were left exposed. And women were like, we'd also like to be able to take care of ourselves. And in that, it's broken our families. There are groups of people that, however you feel about them, seem to have more structured family dynamics. In the South African example, I speak about the Muslim families and the Jewish families. Old school traditional values, not too much freedom. Some of the more progressive / woke ideas that are around the world are not being exercised in some of these communities. They look happy, they look healthy, they're thriving economically, while other
Which
people
ones?
are not. the Muslim and Jewish communities in particular,
Okay.
compared to, let's say,
But
the masses of black.
if one looks at the Muslim countries, obviously there's only one Jewish country. We'll set that one aside because that's fraught with its own issues.
Yeah, yeah,
But if one looks at the Muslim world, where patriarchy is alive and well,
yeah, yeah.
Are they doing well?
What was my point? My point was freedom. Sorry, my
Yes.
point was freedom. So the doing well is going to depend on whose measure you use. If you're using a Western measure, definitely not. Human rights, freedom, etc., etc. If you're using other measures, present fathers, families that are intact, women that are not selling their bodies online. I'm not sure about their population numbers, but I'd like to think they have children versus more progressive places where we speak about LGBTQI+, and we assume that a lot of the people in that community are not having kids because of their sexual orientation. They don't have that, if we were to call it a problem, in terms of having children and replaceability. So from their perspective, they believe that they are successful. My issue is when you listen to people and what they complain about, some of the solutions require you to take away some of their freedoms. And that becomes the clash that we have in society. You want present fathers in the homes, and then you're like, but what's the problem? The problem is the fathers are free to be wherever they want. No one is forcing them to be in the home. The woman is free to get a sperm donor. She's free to also break up with the father and be like, I'm not happy. Did he hit you? No, I'm just, I'm free. I can choose to be with him or not. And because of that freedom, we now have a broken home situation. And you'd need to take away their freedom to kind of force at least present parents in nuclear families. Another one in this country is human rights, where you have NGOs that come and want to protect the rights of undocumented immigrants, foreigners, even though those people, just their existence here is a crime. And the people that hire them, all of us in various ways, we are engaging in crime by hiring people that are undocumented and shouldn't be here. But when you raise that as a solution to say, look, there are people arguably taking jobs, there are people that shouldn't be here, then you have human rights activists that come in and say, but they should be here, they have a right to be here, etc., etc. So some of the freedoms and human rights that we have become hindrances to some of the solutions that would need to be implemented for what we hope would be a healthier society.
Do you think South Africa, as a construct, has a right to be?
As a country?
Yeah.
Oof, you're asking me deep philosophical questions. This is deep. This touches on borders and sovereignty.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I'll speak for the people, I think. And then I'll try, while I'm speaking for the people, to think for myself. Most South Africans have bought into the idea of a sovereign South African state, including black South Africans.
Including Penwell?
No, not me.
Okay.
So the black South Africans are like, this is our country, they say those same things. So for them, they believe in South Africa, but maybe not in its current format. Maybe they want to rework some of the borders and be selective of who they let in and let out easily. Maybe change the currency, change some of the languages, change some of the legal structures that we have, etc., on behalf of the majority of the people. But they believe in this country generally being how it is, with tweaking, maybe even tweaking the constitution. I think the whole world needs to be relooked at. And if I could join a group of people, almost like the guys that sat at the Berlin conference, if I could join a group of people who are like, we'd like to reimagine the world and what it would look like, I'd be very happy to sit there. I think there are so many clashing ideologies, specifically in this country, that I wish this country could be split into different groups. It's a conversation you and I have had privately as well. There are people that are aggressively believe in fantasy of what this country, what this continent should be. And I wish I could wave a magic wand and give them this country or this continent that they yearn for and say, do this, and watch them burn. Because I know they'll burn. Almost the same way you were giving guarantees, I guarantee that they will burn. And then give the other side.
What are those ideas?
So let's speak an example like Pan-Africanism, Sankofa,
Yeah.
going back to what Africa should have been with the kings and the queens and the beauty of building pyramids, etc. Give people that, which is arguably what I was saying about removing traditional structures. Let uMisuzulu run Ingonyama Trust by himself. Give him a sovereign state like Eswatini and take away all the tax support. Stop building RDPs for the people and bringing electricity and let him do his thing. If he wants to tax his people, if he wants to have a Zulu rand or a Zulu whatever currency they have, let him do it and give him time to do whatever he's doing and watch if the people there are happy, which we've already got some type of data now where people that live on Ingonyama Trust land will move to Durban, move to Joburg for a better life. And you're like, what do you want? We want land. And you're like, you left land
left
to
the land, yeah.
live in a shack.
Yeah.
So you're kind of lying. So I wish I could give people that. I wish I could give people like Phil Craig, that independent Cape, etc., and be like, here's your land, and then take away all the things that they maybe haven't thought of, or maybe they have and they pretend they can't see. Take away the cheap labor. Take away the market that they have access to, which is not part of this independent thing, and see how well they thrive. Because it's one of the things I think I've said to Rob Hersoff and other people that at some point to speak about an independent Cape. I wish I could give you an independent Cape, but then you're not allowed to make money in the rest of South Africa.
Yeah.
Let's see you thrive in the beauty of the Western Cape. Maybe you can trade with the rest of the world and become Switzerland. If you're lucky, maybe. But you're not going to get the benefits of everything else because you're working off this assumption of ceteris paribus, everything remaining the same, and then you just get what you want. And that's not how the world works. So I would like us to reimagine just the world. And does that come with borders? Arguably. But in that, low-hanging fruit, you're educated, you're financially mobile, it does not make sense that you're still queuing like everyone else for visas. And there's meant to be like a digital way for you to travel differently from the rest of everyone else. The way you base your financial interests, the way taxes get moved, the idea of cryptocurrencies because there's a dire need for the money system to change. Even these ideas of feminism and women empowerment is because there's something that was being done wrong somewhere. So we need to reimagine the continent. We need to reimagine the world. There are people living in places they absolutely hate purely because they were born there. And there should be some way to allow them to escape. And then if they get burnt, they must pay like a high tax to come back. But at least they've got that option. And we have easy ways using technology, advanced transport, maybe even simulations. You can jump into a simulation where you get to live in China. Julius Floyd, you love China so much. Yeah. For a month, we're going to let you live in China.
Or let them live in Venezuela, for God's sake. Yeah.
Go live in Venezuela. Do it. Maybe in a simulation if we allow. If not, go allow them to live there and then be like, if you want to come back, we're going to need you to commit to these things and we're going to take away some of your freedoms that you were enjoying before you even left. So some of the things that you thought were so cool, maybe you can't run for a public office. Maybe you can't for at least 10 years because we just wanted you to see the pain of what it means and how good we have it here. Because I am aware that we have it good in South Africa, even though I have some issues with some of the things that we have. Venezuela, Julius Floyd, China. I just think we need to reimagine parts of the world. It cannot be that just because I'm born in a country, I'm forced to abide by its constitution.
Yeah, it's an accident of birth, eh?
That's all it is. And I didn't choose it. So we can be more flexible. But in our being more flexible, be very hard about the boundaries. That where you're going as a woman, you can't be half naked. I know it sounds cool now, but we need you to understand. There's an idea that I have which is deemed very controversial. But it's one of the ideas that I think for people that claim human rights is fundamental to what I think is human rights. And it's the idea of living like an animal. Human beings should be allowed to live like chimpanzees on this planet. Given their own space where you've been cut out from electricity, cut out from technology, cut out from advanced transport, cut out from the money system. But now you have to deal with animals chasing you. Maybe you're sleeping under a tree or you're in a cave. People should be allowed to have that option. And currently the money system has bullied almost every human to abide in some way.
Yeah, you know, I think this goes back to something that we said before we started, was that I'm a fan of the system,
Yeah.
right? Purely because it's not hard to look around and see what works and what doesn't work. That simulation, some people need to be in that simulation. Other people can understand what the pros and the cons are.
Sure.
And I feel that in South Africa, for South Africans, we've pretty much got most of it right. I'm not blind to the areas where we're getting it wrong. But, you know, I think that you could go on that journey of discovery and you're going to end up pretty much in the same place. Like you said, if you say, okay, the answer's in kings and queens and royal families, but we'll get rid of them, there's a very good chance that what you'll replace them with is kings and queens, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you have a town or a city in South Africa that you think is close to perfect from a system perspective?
No. Look, I don't look. Perfection's a wonderful striving for, right? There's better run and worse run. I mean, right now we're living this nightmare of Gauteng.
Yeah.
It is a nightmare. I've lived here my whole life.
Yeah.
I've watched a world-class city when it truly was a world-class city, and this is not me kind of putting on a racist lens. I've watched it deteriorate into what we're seeing now.
That's correct.
And that is purely because people are. There's two things at play here. Number one, people who are meant to be doing and paid to do a job of work aren't doing a job of work. And people who are meant to hold them to account in very well thought through structures, i.e. elections, etc., refuse to actually make the call.
100%.
Right. So, you know, you can go around and, you know, there'll be winners and losers at the moment. Yeah, you know, you're going to look, I suppose, at a place like, you know, any Joburger that goes to Cape Town is living in a different country, is seeing a different thing. And the same if you come from Durban and you go to Cape Town. So it's not just an upcountry thing. But the point is that you've probably got more answerability on the governance side. I don't think anybody's imbued with any more special powers. But it is a system that can hold people to account and can deliver.
Sure.
We see that in the first world, where people are held to account and people deliver.
Do you think, or do you fantasize about a better South Africa looking like Cape Town, the whole country?
No, not particularly Cape Town.
Okay.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I'm remarkably comfortable with the diversity of upcountry South Africa, which is just a very smart way of saying I'm a white guy brought up in apartheid and quite comfortable in diverse Johannesburg.
Sure.
Right, where my neighbors who used to be white are no longer white.
Sure.
No, fine.
No, not racially.
Yeah,
I'm
just saying.
Sure.
And then you go out there, you know, your culture reflects that change as well, and it's great. I'm a big fan of that level of diversity. I think that it is wonderful, and you know, we are in Africa after all. We're not. If I wanted to live in Europe, I'd live in Europe.
Sure.
But I'm one of these people that does fix stuff up if it's broken. And it troubles me that you think philosophically about the world. I think a lot simpler about things, saying, you got a job to do, just do it. Why would you want to litter the side of the road?
Sure.
And if you're the city father, don't you drive on these roads? And then what are you thinking when you go through another pothole? Or
a few things piss me off than listening to politicians complain.
Yeah.
Driving through dirty places with potholes.
Yeah. And you think to yourself, you living here, you're driving in the same road. You've got to get, you know, I know where you live and I know where you work.
Yeah.
And your journey in between A and B, you drive through these places that, you know, the lights that aren't working, etc. Don't you strive for better?
Sure.
Or how can you be happy with what this looks like, and you're the guy in charge?
Yeah.
Right. And
is the goal Cape Town? This is not a loaded question. There's a reason I'm asking.
The goal's Cape Town, but I'm always scared. I'm scared of saying that because
not aesthetically, in terms of governance and by Cape Town I mean the better parts of Cape Town. I don't mean the problematic parts.
What I'm saying is that it's no different to any other. I view these things as looking pretty much like a football league, you know.
Sure.
Where are you on the log?
Sure.
You know, and sometimes you know, if you take a PSL here in South Africa, you don't have to be the world's best team to be top of that log. You just have to be better organized than the other 19 teams in the league who are pretty shit.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're world class, just means that you're better.
Sure.
And I think Cape Town's kind of doing that. It's got certain things in its favor, you know, certain geographical things that they've got. But I don't think, look, I'll say this, and said this before, I said this to politicians. Cape Town could never be the business capital of South Africa. It's impossible. It cannot, right? Because it's remote, it's isolated, it's a little island. It's got water around 3/4 of it and desert around the other quarter. So, you know, let's bury this idea that it will take over from Gauteng as the financial heartland. So fix this up. This is really where it matters. But what I'm saying is that any city that's doing well with their ratepayers' money, it will reflect on the performance of that city. And there is one thing that I know you said that you were quite saddened by the outcome of the elections. I wasn't. I was heartened completely, for the simple reason that the voters actually got there, the ones that voted. And just for the record, if people choose not to vote, that's a decision. They must be respected. And I don't think one should get your knickers in a knot because Oaks didn't vote. If they didn't vote, they didn't vote. That's their decision. That's fine. You know, in the best countries, listen, in 1994, when we went to the polls for the first time, I think we had about an 80% poll. 20% of the people didn't vote. Then, what's your problem then? You know, so we're just returning to a global norm here. So let's not get too excited about it. But what the people that did vote said was, they said, ANC, you did not do enough to get a majority vote. DA, you haven't encouraged us to give you some better outcome than what you've had in the last couple of elections, et cetera, et cetera. You go through it. And what has been the net result? The net result is the same thing. Humans is humans. Those politicians are now doing, relative to before, a much better job than before because they know their jobs are on the line.
The context of why I was asking was, I've sat with Pan-Africanists, I've sat with people that are very pro-black, pro-African, and I've asked them to imagine the African utopia that they claim that they're fighting for.
Wakanda.
And practically paint a picture for us so that we can interrogate that utopia. So with the conversation we're having now, I was trying to get you to almost do the same of what would a perfect South African look like for you, so that I can try and ask some questions about it and how it works and who funds it and where everyone kind of sits.
Penuel, you see, I've got a simple answer to that. That comes, once again, it's in my nature, it's in my experiences and so on.
Yeah.
I truly believe, I'm a big fan of the Constitution as was written. Do I think it can't be changed? Of course it can be changed, should be tweaked, and it should be tweaked as we go along, and you know, that's what they do, and that's all good. But I'm not a fan of blaming the Constitution because people haven't done what the Constitution says they should do. So in other words, if you take it all the way down, if South African leadership, political as well as people that work for the state, civil service, did just abide by their own rules, right, we would have our own versions of Cape Town everywhere.
Okay.
Right? So I'm saying Cape Town looks like Cape Town, and you know, it's a nice little sanitized place down below, right? But the rest of the country would be great if you just applied the law. Not talking to, don't go above the call of duty. Just do what you're paid to do, like you and I, right? You have to put out a certain number of episodes, or else people start unsubscribing from your channel. Same here. You've got rules that, but yet we give politicians the right to not do what they're meant to do.
Would we become like America or Europe? Is that the goal?
I see it as such, yeah.
Is that the goal?
When you say that's the goal,
as in for this country, if we were to
I would
be
say if you look at the makeup of the South African population, and the actions of the South African population, the fact of the matter is that young black professionals are leaving the country, right? And where are they going to?
Sure.
So, in other words, if we think that the right model is China, why aren't young South African black doctors going to China? Why aren't they going to Russia if that's our new big flame? Why aren't they going to India, right? They're going to certain places, and that to me is always the strongest thing. And I grew up in the height of the Cold War. And as a kid, I always thought that there was one thing that was betraying this Cold War. And that is that people were killing themselves to get over the border to escape the Soviet bloc. They weren't doing it the other way. And if that's the case, then that one is surely going to lose because they don't have the hearts of the people. And that's the way I view the world, right? I view the world in saying, let's be like the place that people want to go to. Now, in that respect, there's an anomaly that's raised its head. And it's a small one, but it's worth considering. And that is the United Arab Emirates comes along and has attracted a lot of professionals. But they have no democracy, right? So you can start saying, democracy I'm a fan of because it's got checks and balances. But in that case, what are they doing? They've got vision, they've got delivery.
Yeah.
So you start saying, okay, whatever gets you vision and delivery is what we need. That's the primary thing we need. And you need then to be able to hold people to account.
Yeah.
Now, what does South Africa end up looking like? Yeah, it probably ends up looking like the country we borrow money from. Right? And if you use that, I've always said this, like, for example, in business. If you want to grow a business, it's always a thing that's astounded me. I've always been in the small business arena, small and medium business.
Yeah.
If you go and look at a big company that you like and behave like that big company, what do? They market, they employ people, they pay taxes, they do this, they do that, they do everything properly.
Yeah.
If you're running your garage, your business from your garage, are you fulfilling those how are you going to compete with that big company who's doing things this way and you think that you can reinvent the way business is being run?
Do you believe there's space in South Africa for alternative ways of living, different laws, different constitutions, versus being forced to all abide by the same constitution and a similar vision of maybe striving to be like America?
The striving to be like America, I understand where it comes from, right? It was a snapshot in time. In actual fact, the dirty little secret of South Africa was that the thing that brought everybody to the negotiating table in 1990 it had nothing to do with Afrikaners seeing the error of their ways or the ANC deciding let's go and negotiate. It had to do with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we knew communism was dead at that point, right? And the net result was that you'd have a constitution like we have, which is very Western in the way that it operates, right? If one is to contest the grounds of those constitution, I mean, like, let's take what MK says. We want more African laws.
Sure.
I've had Ndlela here. What does that look like? Okay, you give them that fun little soundbite that sounds a hell of a sexy. Oh, Roman Dutch law. We're not Roman.
What does
Dutch.
it look like? Has it been documented?
Yeah.
Can you show us?
What shit are you talking about? So in other words, under this law, can I now steal your cell phones? Right? And no, you can't. Well, then what's different?
Yeah.
So, when we get hooked on these semantics because it sounds quite sexy, we don't want to have Roman Dutch law because we all understand the dog whistle because it sounds like it's European.
Sure.
Right? That may be in the place of documented. Give it some other name if you fancy.
Sure.
But it's going to end up looking the same.
Sure.
So I'm saying if there's an idea out there that works, great. But then it must work.
Okay.
And that's what I believe.
I think the last thing I want to say on this is I believe in decolonization as a project. I think decolonization, this is another sexy term that means nothing. I understand that we were colonized on the African continent by people that had interests. And they came with their systems. And by and large, their systems were strong, superior in the fact that they dominated the ones that were here. And most of us have sort of bought into them moving forward. For me, decolonization means removing the problematic aspects of the system that worked back then and don't work now.
Like what?
In the legal space, in the way that, it's constant tweaking, but it's going back to first principles. What are we trying to solve? As an example, you're fighting with your wife or you guys are committing to each other. Is the marriage contract still the best system? If not, what's a better system? How should it work? Should families be coming together, etc.? Do the same in healthcare. Understanding the healthcare system around the world is as powerful as it is. Are we really trying to cure illness, or are we trying to just manage people and make money off of them until they die? And specifically in that space, there are certain, even in the legal space, there are certain ways of being before colonialism that worked. You want to bring those ideas, put them against the colonial system, and then bring in what worked and then chuck out what doesn't work anymore. For me, that's decolonization. You do the same with education. Silly things like clothing. We're in Africa. Should we be wearing ties in the middle of the peak of heat? Which languages serve best in certain spaces, etc., etc. I think decolonizing as a project and including all races on the continent, at least for Africa, but even for the rest of the world, I think is one of the things that the world needs to do for us to progress. Because until we do that, people are constantly going to be angry, and they're constantly going to point to colonialism, where sometimes it's not even the problem. English is a good example of this. I normally fight with people. I love the English language. It allows me to access a whole lot of resources, people, I get to travel, etc., etc. Now, I've gone through the process of decolonizing English. What that means is I don't see it as a English-British language. I use it to tell beautiful stories of growing up in rural KZN and poetry and whatever the case may be. And I own it today, where I can look at a white British guy and listen to his English and be like, what the hell are you saying? That's so whack. This is mine and I love it. Do the same with fashion, where we've got branded clothing now, which has bright colors and they're not dull. You're like, this is like the peacock in Africa. And you're like, this is our fashion, and it's become decolonized.
Says the man wearing black.
Says the cold, dark Soviet Union. But you own it and it becomes yours. Because I think after that, that's where agency and becomes a factor, and we start owning
now,
ourselves.
What stops that process? Because I don't see it in either or. I see it in and.
Yeah. It's
mean?
Meant to be an and.
I don't see. I've got to say that if one looks at colonialism, right. To me, and it's very easy for me to say this because my own background is maybe a little bit different, but that's for another program. But the point is that surely one looks at the colonial project, and I'm admittedly, hand up, I didn't go through the emotional scarring, right? But surely you say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the best out of what you taught us.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the best that we could have taught you, but you were too busy doing your own
100%.
thing. And I'm going to end up with the best, which is kind of what has happened in countries like, Helen, are you listening? Places like Singapore, etc. Right? Where, have you ever been to Thailand?
No.
There's an interesting thing in Thailand. Thailand was officially, one of their kings even said, Thailand had a unique history. It was never colonized.
Yeah.
And they were angry about that. In actual fact, that took them 100 years to catch up because they weren't colonized.
Okay.
So when the colonial masters in Southeast Asia were introducing things like electricity and cars, Thailand didn't get that, right? And they were way behind the curve. They were being run like a medieval kingdom.
Sure.
And they had to do some tremendous catching up. Incidentally, their big catching up was the Vietnam War, but that's by the by. The point is that Southeast Asia took the colonial project, said, it's over, but hey, we'll keep the car, thank you very much, and we'll keep electricity, and we'll keep the legal system and whatever else is making their country a better place.
Yeah.
And then you tinker on the margins. You're going from there.
I have to put on the record that colonialism was horrible in many respects. Many people were killed. Many of the ways of living were undermined. There was a lot of brutality, which, to what you're saying about emotional scarring, many people are still living through today. But the reality is, if you're more of a pragmatist, is yes, you ask some of the people that hate colonialism with a passion to be like, are you willing to let go of some of the things that colonialism came with? And the reality is most of them are not going to, realistically. The example you gave, or the model you gave of let's take the best that you came with and let's take the best that you never allowed us to bring to the fore that could have worked. For me, that is the decolonization project. And anyone who argues otherwise, I think, is lying or doesn't really know what they're speaking about. It's the idea of, for me, let's assume Europeans came here and there wasn't brutality or that much brutality. And what best practices would we have shared to be where we are today, of which we would have gotten electricity, cars, there would be white people living here. What would that look like? And then let's imagine that and then try and implement it in various ways. And for me, that's decolonization. It's not get rid of white people, get rid of all white things, and let's go back to wearing skins. And I think anyone who says that is talking trash. Decolonization for me is exactly what you're saying. And I think if I can convince as many specifically wealthy white South Africans to buy into it, I think South Africa could be one of the leading nations on earth. In a small way, the Springboks are very tiny way of seeing what decolonization is, where you're embracing a national animal, the Springbok. You've got a diverse nation. You've brought in something like Igwijo, which is the singing of traditional songs of celebration at the games. We're playing a type of rugby, which is, number one, traditional Afrikaans, but it also has the legacies of Webb Ellis. But then you also have the flair of coloreds and black, and we dominate the world in that. If you can extrapolate that into like business and society, and you meet white South African business people around the world literally going and saying, oh, we don't do this in Africa. We have these cool systems where we sleep at these times, we work at these times, and that's how we're productive, because we have decolonized. And as a white South African, we have Ubuntu, which does this, and where we don't have money, we do value exchange. And because these are some of the things we learned, and where the bank doesn't give us funding, we have a stokvel, which you guys call crowdfunding or whatever. And you're like, this is how we've decolonized finance, healthcare, and it works for us, and the rest of the world is coming here to learn.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we had Mustafa here, and in a matter of Zimasa, we had him here, and we solved the land problem.
Hey!
And now it looks like Penwell and I might be solving the rest of South Africa's problem. So to Penwell, thank you so much for joining us today. To everybody that enjoyed that, subscribe to the channel, go and watch, go and have a look at what Penwell does. That's far more impressive. And thank you so much. We'll see you again on the State of the Nation.